All right, good morning and welcome everyone. Well, good morning from San Diego, probably afternoon for some of you. My name is Cristela Garcia-Spitz and I'm the Digital Initiatives Librarian at UC San Diego Library. And I'm here on behalf of the DLF Project Managers Group, the steering committee. We recently discussed and wanted to put together a series of demos to share and kind of open some dialogue in our community beyond just the time of the conference. And so this is kind of our first launch, our initial demo to kind of see how this would work using Zoom.
And you can mute and we can stop our video.
So we are going to be recording, so if you wouldn't mind, please put your mic on mute, which you can do that at the bottom left-hand controls. You should see a little mic and you can click on that to turn on your mute button. And then later on when there's discussion, you'll want to unmute if you're going to ask a question. So basically, today I'm going to talk a little bit about project portfolio management and demo how we do that here at UC San Diego Library. And but in general, I'm going to try to cover some of the goals and challenges of portfolio management. And while I'm talking kind of tool specific about Confluence and JIRA, hopefully it can give people ideas, even if they're not using those specific tools, about maybe things they could be doing to try to do more portfolio management. I'm going to try to get through a lot today. So my plan is to kind of give you an overview of what we do and walk through our two tools. And then I'm going to try to stop myself at a certain time so that we have time for discussion. And then I do have these slides, which I have shared in the chat box. So if you want a link to those, you can jump in and join me in this document. And what I was thinking I would do after is capture screenshots of maybe specific things we talk about if people had questions, and then I can share this this deck of slides as well. So you'll have both the video and the slide deck to kind of refer back to if you wanted to look back about what we talked about. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. And I think I'll just use this instead of jumping into the presentation mode. So this is just a broad overview, a big picture sort of definition of project portfolio management. It's really about managing a group of projects. And so some of the goals are listed there: prioritization, allocation of resources, and this could be resources in terms of time, it could be in terms of labor, in terms of people, and then also resolving some of those issues or change management. I know we have a lot of staff coming and going, and so that's often, for me, a big part of project portfolio management is trying to manage the people that are working on these projects and anticipating changes that might be happening within the organization. And then also, it's a great way to be able to report out on what's happening and what's getting done within a group of projects. So again, as I mentioned, I'm going to jump into some specifics of Confluence and JIRA, but I'm hoping that this really does provide ideas for any tool. A lot of what I'll be showing, I think it's possible to do that in Excel or in Google Drive. And sorry, I'm getting some notifications popping up there. Okay, so I wanted to start with a round of thanks. So I will say that none of this sort of project portfolio management would be happening without a rather large team that I work with. And so I'm listing a few specific people here. But we have a fairly large library. So UC San Diego is about, it's a large academic library with about 38,000 students. We are a public research institute, so we also have about 100 research centers on campus. So we are a large library setting, and we do work across different parts of the library as well as different parts of the university. And so I'm based in our digital library development program, and I work on our digital projects that could be anything from digitization of our materials within the library, or it could also be working on digital, like humanities projects, that sort of thing across the campus. We also have a research data curation program, which does our data side of things. So that's something that we both use the same sort of tools and mechanisms for tracking our projects, but I'm going to be talking specifically about the projects that I work on. And so we use Confluence, which is a wiki-based tool, and JIRA, which is a ticketing system to track our projects. And a few years ago, we've been using JIRA and Confluence. Let's see, we've been using JIRA since 2007, so over 10 years. And we've been using Confluence since about 2009, so just about 10 years. So we've been doing it quite a bit of time, and I did want to kind of say again the like amount of complexity that we've added over the years. We've done a lot of development and a lot of work on it. So the first team I really wanted to thank was this particular group here. About 4 or 5 years ago, we spent quite a bit of time customizing these tools to make sure that they could work for us. And so that's kind of the work that I'll be presenting today. And then the other people that I wanted to thank, these are the people that are kind of now at this point, they're the ones that are really in there day in, day out doing that work. So our metadata analysts play a really large role in keeping this going. And I didn't list all of our project managers, but we have a model where we use lots of different people who do project management on our projects. And so they're also very involved and engaged. So it takes a village to do this kind of work. So let's see. So with that, I'm going to try to just jump in and do a demo and show you some of the different pages. And then I'll come back to this deck of slides to talk about some of the benefits and the challenges of this work. So this is our instance of Confluence. So Confluence is a wiki-based tool. It really, when you first, if you use it, you know that it's a lot of just kind of blank pages, and then you kind of have to construct the space. So like I said, we spent a lot of time customizing it so that we were able to have this top level navigation, and this homepage we completely changed. But I think if you go down and start to look at the way we've organized our pages, you'll see it starts to look like a Confluence, let's see. So I'm going to go to our Digital Library Development Program page. And so this might look a lot more what people are used to with Confluence. It's kind of just a standard page layout where we filled it with lots of information. So we have a little bit of information about our program. And then we use our spaces here. So as a library, a couple years ago, we decided to make Confluence our intranet. And so when we did that, we shut down our old internet and moved everything into Confluence. And so we had to kind of decide how to organize our wiki, our space. And so each program and all the major committees get a page that looks like this and has all their things like standard information we wanted each group to report out on, their annual reports, their org chart. And then we have these bigger categories that are just kind of like whatever makes sense for that group or that program. So let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and jump straight into our digital projects. So one of my first tasks when I got here, we started using Confluence, is that I wanted to make sure every project that we were working on had a project plan. So we started using it, again, in a very rudimentary way. We started using our, actually, I'm just going to go here, our Confluence to just document our projects. And so I'll start with this one. So each project gets a page, and each project plan has these standard sections. And so we've tried to structure every page the same way and using the same sections. And it's a pretty basic sort of thing, but we've used a lot of different little widgets and tools to make that look this way. So you'll see here, I'm using a feature called the table of contents to structure every page. So every section that is a heading, so you'll see this is a heading, then gets a part of that table of contents widget. And then I have some standard sections. So I have a project overview, I have the team, whoever's working on it gets listed, and then some basic information about what the project is. And then the other widget that this page is using is called a page tree. So it basically takes any, the way Confluence is set up is there are pages and then child pages. So if I look here on the side, you'll see that I've got a page that's called the project plan, and then I've got a bunch of child pages that are all the meeting notes. So what that then does is it gives me this side view where I can also have all of these displayed here. So it's just an easier way for navigation of this page. But this is a basic, pretty much a basic thing that you could do in any Confluence. You can build out this kind of a page. And then the benefit is if you're using this in a standard way, let's see, let me get back here, then you can list all your projects will have this standard project plan page, and you're kind of more consistently listing out all your projects, you know, one place that you can go to get all your projects. And so the way that I do this is I just have created a sample project plan page. And every time I start a new project, I can just copy this page. And then after I make a copy, I can edit all these sections. And then I just reuse this page over and over and over again. And they always end up being, they exist in the same sort of space. So you'll see all the projects are grouped under what I've called current projects. So that's taking advantage of just some basic fundamental pages within Confluence. And at one point, we used to have this really great plugin where I was able to kind of create a table view of all the projects. And unfortunately, again, about 4 or 5 years ago, that plugin was no longer being maintained and was being taken away. And so that created put me in a panic because I used that feature so much. So I started talking to our IT group, and a group of us, again, worked on how we could kind of maintain some of those features, but build it out in a different way using whatever we had available to us at the time. And what we ended up deciding to do is to use JIRA to kind of keep track of some of that information that I used to be able to keep track of in this plugin, where I could keep some basic information about the projects and have it displayed in a table. And so, so that got us thinking more about how to use JIRA for our projects. So JIRA is a ticketing system that typically our developers used to use as they were building our digital repositories. So if they had action items, if they had something that they were working on, they would create a ticket to either fix things or enhance things. And so we started thinking about how could we use JIRA to track our projects. And so we started thinking about what if we created a ticket for every project. Just like we have the project plan, we could capture some basic information in there. And then we could start to take advantage of some of the features that JIRA has that helps you track things a little bit better than Confluence does. Confluence isn't really built to do any kind of tracking, but JIRA really is. So, so that's what we've done. We ended up building a ticket, and I'm going to go into just the top level tickets at this point to kind of show you how we're using those. And then if we have time, I can tell you a lot more detail about how that plays out and how that works, but we'll see how far we get. So I'll click on this so you can see what a ticket looks like for the project. So we're taking some of the information that we capture in the project plan, some basic information like the title of the project. We usually do an abbreviated description of the project here. We do link to the project plan. So you can do that in either through the JIRA ticket, you can do that, or on the Confluence page, you can mention and connect the tickets with the project plan. And then we wanted to capture certain information like who was the project manager, who is the metadata analyst that's assigned to the project, and then some date information. So we added these extra fields, these customized fields, in order to put some of this basic information into the ticket. And then what we really did, what took a long time, was to think about what our workflow would look like. So one feature that I really liked that we were able to take advantage of in JIRA was coming up with different steps. So you can kind of have some logical order. So I'm going to show you this view, but it's not a very good view, so I'll warn you in advance. But basically, you have different phases. So you can have a phase for digitization. Let me see if I can enhance this a little bit. There we go. So we created basically the steps of the project. There's a planning phase. There's what we call digitization and description. DAMS ingest is another thing. And then our final sort of step, wrapping up and then done. What we learned over time is that you also need appending, because lots of your projects end up going kind of on hold or on hiatus. So we added all these different steps. And again, this isn't a great visualization of it because we had to do so many two-way arrows. Initially, we kind of just did one-way arrows. So it was like you move from planning to digitization. But I don't think we anticipated for real life, where sometimes you go to digitization and then you realize, wait, we're actually not ready to go to digitization. We're going back to planning. So we had to create a lot of two-way arrows between these different steps so that you could navigate both ways and go sometimes take a step back in a project. But basically what that feature does is it allows you to just click on these different statuses. So you can say, this project's wrapping up, this project's complete. And so it's just a way, again, of tracking what's happening with the projects. And then what that allowed us to then do was in Confluence, we could create that table view that I was hoping and longing for. I wanted one way to kind of look at all the projects and keep track of what status they're in.
God, that's awesome.
So, thanks. So, so this lets me decide what fields from the JIRA ticket to display here. And then I can sort by those columns. So if I want to look and see just this person's projects and kind of what's happening with them, I can do that. And so that's been really, really a huge benefit to us, was to have this sort of table view. And it helps us keep track of like what's happening, when it's happening, who needs help, which areas should we be focusing on. So that was the goal, actually. That was originally why we started using JIRA, was so that we could just create this table view. But the longer we used JIRA, the more we realized there were features that we could use within JIRA. So I'm going to show you the dashboard that we created. So one thing that this has been actually a bigger help than I thought it was going to be was just to start playing with the gadgets that you can have that come automatically with JIRA. So you can, I don't know how much people have played with this, but you can click on add a gadget, and there's all kinds of different, there's all kinds of different built-in tools so that you can look at your information in different ways. And so as soon as we started to play with that a little bit more, we realized this is like one of my favorite, is just this pie chart. So then you can just add a little built-in tool, and you can kind of specifically say, I'll show you what it looks like when you edit it. You can just say, I want to look at all the tickets that are this kind of ticket, and I want to look at the project manager field. And then it generates this nice little table for you. So this helps me pay attention to who's working on which projects. And this is really, really helpful when it comes to our metadata analysts. So right now, we usually have about 20 different projects happening at once. And we only have 2 metadata analysts working on the digital library development projects. So that can be a challenge, right? I want to make sure that I'm not overloading them. And when projects are hitting them, that they aren't overwhelmed. So this has been able to give me an opportunity to kind of look and see, okay, Ryan has 24 projects assigned to him. That sounds like a lot and a little overwhelming. But then I can get this more detailed view, and I can sort by status, and I can see that he's only primarily involved with either in the planning stage when we're first setting up a project, or in the ingest stage when we're ready to move the content into our digital repository. He's not really as involved when we're digitizing or when we're finishing up a project, and there's a lot, wrapping up represents a lot of different stuff. So really, when I look at this view, I can see he's got 4 projects on his plate and 1 in the kind of planning phase. So that's not too bad. So I can kind of monitor that and make sure that he's not, again, overwhelmed or over-assigned with too many projects. And it also gives me an opportunity, if I'm meeting with him, to kind of quickly pull up those projects and say, okay, these are the projects that you're working on right now. So it just kind of helps me, gives me some sanity too, that I don't have to pay attention to all this stuff in my own head. I can just rely on this as the place that I go to look that up. And then recently, JIRA also started to build in these boards. So you can start to have, if people are used to Trello and really like the Kanban style board, you can also start to put your tickets in that sort of space as well and move things through here. I haven't tweaked this too much, so this is just kind of like the initial setup of it. And we have such granularity right now in all of our projects, so I'm still trying to figure out how, if this is going to be useful to us, but I think it will be. So again, it's kind of been nice to see how you can sort of use maybe what wasn't built or intended to be the sort of tool has been very helpful in us sort of managing our overall So, okay, so that's just a big general overview. And then I'm gonna try to, I'll talk a little bit about the benefits and the challenges. Yeah, let me try to wrap my slides up, and then we can kind of go into more of a discussion, and I can try to show you more of the features depending on what you're interested in. So some of the benefits, it's definitely really helped us track the projects better with more granularity. It's provided that sort of perspective, like the overall big picture, which I don't think we always had. It's helped us align sort of the work of the different programs. So I think you can see where, again, I was sort of worried about our metadata analyst, and this is a way that I can kind of see if they have too much on their plate. I didn't go into some of the specifics, but when you're using a ticket, let's see, I'll go back to this one. You can assign it to a specific person. So if I finished up the work that I was doing, this is of course sitting with me. But if it wasn't, I could assign it to someone else. And so then it goes into their queue as work that they need to do. So I think it's a really nice way of kind of letting people know, okay, the ball's now in your court. And it's created a lot of technical solutions, but I will say collaboration is always still a human sort of thing, that you really still have to talk about it actively. What, you know, is this working? Is this not working? And that leads me to sort of the challenges. Like the biggest thing, the hardest thing I think to do is you've got to use it. You've got to actively keep it up to date. If it's not reliable information, people then won't go to it to use it. So if it's not, you know, if it's not true, or if it's kind of out of date, people stop using it. We've definitely struggled with that. I think a lot of our tickets maybe aren't as accurate as they have to be, if they should be. We do use the comments section, so you can kind of see like if something still is a hang up here, we try to put a comment so you can kind of go and see when was the last time somebody touched this ticket. And you can see sometimes there is large gaps between when there's updates on the ticket. I think one thing you really have to think about is balancing whether it's worth this time and investment, and if you can, if it actually is worth the time and the energy that it takes to maintain it. So for some people, I think, again, with us, with a large institution where we had 20 different projects going on at once, it is needed. If we were a smaller shop, I think you could do some of this, again, like in other settings. So you could do, you know, the project plan concept could be done in a Word document or a Google Drive setting, I think fairly easy. And so it might not be worth having something this complex. If there's, you know, only a few people working together, you might be able to do something in a much more lightweight way, because there are costs to having Confluence and JIRA and then also to maintaining it. Something we learned that I'll talk a little bit more about is, again, you want to have, like, it's nice to have customization, but too much customization then becomes a problem. So something that specifically, I think I mentioned, again, we had a plugin that we were using quite heavily. And then when that plugin was no longer available, we had to scramble. So sometimes customization can create some of those problems where you get a little too relying on sort of the workarounds and the fixes. And then you kind of lose out in the time it takes to find another solution when that plugin goes away. And then also, our IT has learned the more we were using sort of plugins and doing sort of like weird workarounds, the harder it was for them to do upgrades. So when they had system upgrades to Confluence or JIRA, it took them a lot longer to try to tease it out and do testing and troubleshooting. And so then we got behind in the version of Confluence and JIRA that we were using. So we kind of had to find a balance there. And we've, again, maybe cut back on some of the customization work that we were doing. And we've tried to go more with the out-of-the-box features of Confluence and JIRA. And I will say Confluence and JIRA has also evolved quite a bit over the years as well. Another big challenge is getting buy-in. So we have these pages set up, but I would say there's probably only a handful of us that actively are looking at them this way. So I'm still working to get some of like our upper management to look at the projects this way. So before they start approving more projects, thinking about how many projects are in the queue. So that's something, again, it takes buy-in, it takes getting people comfortable looking at these pages and seeing what's going on and using the tools that way. And then I think the other big thing is just to be able to stay flexible. We know that these are our tools right now, but you know, Atlassian, the company that does Confluence and JIRA, their costs have been rising, and so we may have to rethink whether we use these tools. Something I like to think is that we've gotten people accustomed to using collaborative software in our institution, and I think that that's more important than getting tool specific. So the fact that they're now used to collaborating and sharing this information and putting it all in one place is more valuable. And so if we had to move to another tool, that's fine because they're now accustomed to doing that. So I tried to focus more on how can you get people sharing and working together rather than getting so dependent on the actual tool. I'm going to share just a little bit of sort of the lessons learned. I've already kind of mentioned some of these. That plugins make it very hard to upgrade to new versions. I think it's really important to experiment. I think that's one of the best things about the workplace that I'm in is that people are willing to experiment and just try new things and see if it works and see if it doesn't. I think the important thing is to reevaluate it along the way because there may be things that you could maybe stop doing because nobody's using that feature, or things that, you know, that maybe, again, you started to do it because you thought it was going to work a certain way, and then you realized down the road, it didn't really work that way. So being able to let go of some of that stuff as well. Being flexible in terms of, like I was showing with that workflow, making sure arrows go both ways so that you can actually, if you go from one step to the next step, you can actually go back. So having to build some of those things into your thinking. And then the other big lesson with this was, I think if you try to think about what you're trying to do, the end goal, and then work backwards, like I really wanted this table view. And so that was what we kind of had in mind when we were testing and doing the tickets, is we were trying to figure out how can we make this table. So that really helped us kind of, I think through the process, is starting with what's the end result and then working back on how to get there. And then this is just a little list of the things to sort of experiment with in JIRA, your dashboard, boards, the workflow fields, labels. One thing that we need to do more of is watching pages. Who's watching those pages? Who's following along with you? Like, I'd like to build in more people watching certain spaces and pages. And then the other thing I will finish on, and then we can open it up to discussion and look at some more things in more detail, is just, I think in the last 5 years or so, we've kind of had an explosion of tools. So we went from using Confluence and JIRA, and our programmers were mainly using JIRA, to now they're doing more software development collaboratively with other universities. So they've moved into the GitHub setting, and Slack came about. So now there's a lot more in the moment sort of chatter. So that becomes, again, like another tool where you might have information about projects in Slack. You might have information in email. You may have information in all these different places. We also use Google Drive. So I think that's kind of a sort of another challenge, is to kind of figure out, where should this information live? Where should things be happening? And I think that's something that's kind of, again, each tool kind of has its own strengths and benefits. So trying to figure out, like, in the moment, maybe you're using Slack, but for a long-term decision, make sure you're capturing that on the project plan, that kind of thing. So, okay, I am gonna stop there so that we can talk a little bit more detail. If there's certain pages that people wanna focus on, I wanna open it up to your questions, and hopefully I didn't move too fast through some of our, as I was doing the demo. So I will, yeah, let's see. I'm gonna try to see our chat here. Okay, I see a couple questions in chat, but let's see. Okay, how are the Confluence view columns related to the JIRA task type? Okay, so I think, oops, that's the wrong page. So when you're looking at this view, this is actually a report. I'm going to go ahead and edit the page. And this is a feature in Confluence where you can get a report from JIRA. So it looks like this, and then when you click on it, you're able to, you'll see a lot of, we've used kind of almost the same string of text, and this is something I can share too. So we just are naming the type of ticket that we wanted to call out here. And so JIRA has different types of projects, and then within that you create tickets. So that's the grouping. It's our collections project portfolio. And then you're listing kind of, we use the label DLDP or DLDP on all of our tickets. So you see that here. And then, so that's pretty much all you have to list here. And then, let's see, it pulls that information from those tickets. So these are any CCP tickets that are open that have the DLDP label. And let me see, so did the person who asked that, did that answer that question? And feel free to unmute yourself and let me know if I'm not catching it or if I should follow up. Okay, great. Okay, let's see. Okay, the next question, what kind of strategies have you used to encourage, enforce use, and updating of Confluence and JIRA that haven't been worked on? Great question. I did skim over a lot of things. So basically, we do have, I'm going to go back to this page here to show you. So we have a big committee structure here in our library. So we have a steering committee for our digital library. We have a group that's called our operations group. And so anyone that's considered a project manager is a part of our operations group. And they meet monthly. So every month we just try to get everybody who's working on a project into a room, and we ask that before that meeting, they update their project plan and the JIRA ticket. Now, will I say, does that happen? Do we enforce that strictly? Not really, but it is a nice once a month. It's a big group of people, and not everyone always makes it to that meeting. But it is kind of like a nice once a month standard sort of time for people to go and look at their project plans and their JIRA tickets and update those. We also implemented a 6-month review. So every 6 months, January, and then again in end of June, early July, we're meeting just a small group of us. So myself, we have a project coordinator position, and then the head of our digital library meets to kind of walk through all the projects and kind of say, where are we at? So that's another time where we're able to kind of push and say, okay, some of these tickets are really out of date. We need to work on updating these different sets of tickets. And then in the next 6 months, these are the projects we're really going to try to focus on giving some attention to. It's worked in varying degrees. I can tell you I'm usually pulled in 5 different directions. And so I wish I was better at the follow-up and the getting everyone to update their pages. I think that's definitely the challenge to any system that you use, is just making sure that it stays up to date. Let me see, let me get back to the questions. Okay, again, did that answer the question or any follow-ups from that question? Okay, great. Let's see. Oh, I think I skipped this one. What is the CPP number at the upper left on each? Okay. So yeah, so I didn't do a great job of explaining that, but basically, yeah, so within JIRA, you can set up different types of, again, they're called projects, which again is a hard terminology because it conflicts with kind of what we're calling a project. But you can set up, we have, again, a ton of different types of tickets that are being made. And this is kind of my realm, is we decided to set up what we called CPP tickets. And so then when we created these tickets, we were able to customize the fields and what we were calling a ticket. So in this case, we're calling a ticket a digital project. And that's what it is for within this sort of realm. And then we, again, customized this workflow. We added certain fields like that didn't exist before, like project manager and metadata analyst. I didn't go into great detail, but we did add a start and an original due date. So you have when the ticket was created and you have when the ticket is due. But I noticed our due dates often shift. Like you can see, this was a really big project, I will say, that changed quite a bit over the years. And so it's nice to have the concept of when did we originally start the project, and then when did we actually, like as the date shifts and the due date moves, keeping track of how far that moved. So we customized all this stuff to make these tickets. And then the CPP ticket is automatically generated. So you can see CPP 7, this is one of our early projects that's been going on for a long time. I think we're now, you know, as high as 132. So we do use this. We have been using this for, again, about 5 years. So it's quite, again, it's matured over the years. Let's see. Did that answer that question? Okay, great. Okay, let's see. All right, I think this is the next question. What does it look like to move a project from one step in the workflow to another? Do you always do that, or can you get the people on those various steps to move the project to the next step? Yes, so anyone can change these. It's not just controlled by me. So for example, if I wanted to, again, I'm going to go ahead and change it because it's not a big deal. If I click on complete project, it basically, actually, I don't want to do that one. Let me change another one. I can do this one. So if I wanted to say, actually, and I'm not going to get into a lot of complexity, but a lot of these projects we do in batches. So, so we might have a batch that moves through different stages. And then in the same project, we're going to go back to square one and redigitize again. So that was again, I'm not going into great detail about it, but we wanted to be able to have this concept of batches represented here. And we wanted to be able to move back and forth between the workflow. So even if something's at one stage and then we want to take it back to another stage, you just move it back. And then if I want to now go back to that stage, I just move it back to that stage. So it's not like it's doing a whole bunch. This is notifying whoever was watching this issue that I'm doing that, but that's about it. So you can pretty easily move in and out of those steps. And all it does is it updates it here, and then it's going to update it when I display that, that table in Confluence. It'll update it here as well. So it's pretty easy to represent, to change from step to step. When I do hit on complete and actually complete the project, it does close the ticket. So that's one thing that you can't really go back from too much. And that's why we kind of have like a wrapping up stage. Oh, and here it did send me an email as well, so you can turn on notifications. So whoever's watching it, again, is getting these tickets right now, which I'm sure they're thrilled about getting. So you can get, again, notifications in your email as well. Let's see. Did I answer that? Let me see that question again. Oh, okay. Let me talk a little bit more about batches. Okay. Let me see. Let me find a good project that represents batches. Oh, I know. I am going to go. So it's nice to have the search functionality. So this is an example. I am going to get a little more complicated here. So because we knew that we had batches within our project, that we often have this kind of notion of we're going to do this many items first, and then we might group them based on, it could be based on format, like let's say it's a collection that has documents, images, and audio. We might batch by format, or if it's just a really large project, we might try to say we're only going to do 200 in the first batch, and then we'll do more in the next batch. So because we had that concept, we knew that every project isn't super linear. So it's not going to just, you know, we could have a batch that's in one step and another batch that's in another step. So what we decided to do is to try to keep these really broad as possible. And then we created a whole other type of ticket called DAMS ingest to represent the individual batch. So again, this is getting probably more complicated for some of you, but hopefully somewhat more useful for some of you that are already doing stuff like this. So this ticket, it's the DAMS ingest ticket. And so it's, again, a whole other project. It's a different type of ticket, and it has a different workflow. And I think this workflow is really complicated. Yeah, so it's got all kinds of different steps. And this is mainly used by our metadata analysts. So they're the ones that decided what all the different steps would be. And so they created this ticket in order to show the details of what's happening with this batch. And so they can put all kinds of information here about what's happening with this very specific batch. And So this is more of the details, I guess. And so we'll just try to keep the high level information in the CPP ticket, and then the more detailed, the nitty-gritty details if something's going wrong. Let me see if I can show you. Sometimes the comments get really extensive. Yeah, you can see we've got lots of different back and forth if there were issues or problems. We do use the JIRA ticket for quality control. So if you find any issues or problems, you report it in the ticket in the comments. So it's one place to keep track of any issues or problems. And then I can also, like, whoever's paying attention maybe doesn't want to know all the ins and outs, but could read up on it if there was a problem. This has been very helpful historically too. If we want to look back and be like, why is something this way? You can kind of come back and look at the comments. So that's kind of how we separated out when we needed to have a more complex project. Some of our projects are very, very basic and only have the one batch. Some of them are like, this was a much more complicated project. And then you can, from this ticket, see the more granular details. So let's see. Okay, great. Thank you. I see that was there. Okay. Let me see the next. How often do you update documentation, and how do you decide the schedule? Okay, let me start with that. So once we set up the project plan template, I would say it hasn't evolved that much over the years. It's been pretty consistent. So let me get back to a project plan. This is that sample project plan. So it's pretty general categories. So we've got project overview, objective, priority, the team members. So those sections have kind of remained the same over the years. The tickets, we haven't had to tweak too much. Again, we added a couple fields after using it for a while. We kind of reevaluated. I think like maybe it was within the first year of using it that we kind of did some reflective, is this working, is this not working? I think we're overdue thinking about it again and deciding if this is working for us, what we want to tweak, what we want to work more closely on. But each project, in terms of each project, how often the projects meet, it varies. So we don't have a set schedule for each project. Like I said, we do those monthly check-ins with everyone, and that's kind of a standard consistent. But depending on the project, it may meet once in the beginning, and then once towards the middle, and once towards the end, or it may meet, some projects I think we're meeting quite regularly because there's a lot going on. So it just really depends on the project. Typically, the project manager is in charge of the project plan. So the way we work here is I am the digital initiatives librarian, so I do some of this portfolio management. We have a project coordinator who's responsible for kind of training the project managers and then kind of touching base with them as they need help and trouble. And then our project managers could be anyone in the library. So it could be the curator of a collection. It could be let's look at the list of project managers. We have quite a few. Actually, I'll look at this dashboard. It depends on how the project comes about, and that kind of informs who the project manager is going to be. So we have our media librarian, our Latin American studies librarian is a project manager, our Chinese studies librarian is a project manager, the director of our special collections has two projects going on. This is our preservation librarian. So it could really be anyone from the organization that might be the project manager, depending on what the project is. We do use students. We actually have a student page. Let me see if I can get to our student page quickly. So we really do heavily rely on students. So we did give students access to this. They actually, I think our pages for students are great. Let's see if I can get to it quick. So we do use Confluence for all kinds of information. This is an example of our student workers page. They keep track of their schedules here. We use a plugin that they're able to do that. And then we keep track of who our students are, and their contact information is here, which is really great. And so one of our people who oversees the students keeps track of information here. So we do give them access to the pages as well. I wouldn't say that they update the pages at all, but they may need access to it for whatever reason. So we do share with our students as well. And I think the way that our IT does do that is they are able to just use their email addresses to be able to set up access for them to get into here. But that may depend on it. I will say we do have a library IT that works quite closely with us on maintaining this. They've been, again, a big part of our work and our work structure. And so we've been able to have their help in setting this up and customizing this. I know some places aren't structured that way. They may not have library IT to be able to do this. So you might have to think, again, more about what's out of the box, what's, just as soon as you set it up, what do you have access to? So that could vary depending on the institution. Let's see, did I answer that question? Okay, let's see. So JIRA, I'm reading the question about, does JIRA move the project along, i.e. notify the next person who needs to work the next step? No, I will say it's not that sophisticated. So basically, I'll go back into the same ticket. When you do assign it to someone, they do get an email notification. So if I finish up the work that I'm doing and reassign it to someone else, it will ping them. But then it's kind of their responsibility to come in and do the next whatever piece they're supposed to do and then assign it to the next person. So this has been, I think it's mixed. It's definitely a good feature and it's very helpful. But right now I can tell you there's a lot of stuff that are assigned to me that I have not been working on. So it's not like it sends reminders or that sort of thing. It's a little flat in that way. Let's see, did that answer that question? Okay, let's see. Somebody said you can use blockers and block by, but it doesn't automatically notify the user. Yeah, thank you. And I will say at this point, it's definitely, people can, if they have things they want to add, definitely chime in. Feel free to unmute yourself and add on. Let's see. Do you have 1 or 2 tips on how you've used Confluence and JIRA to report up to senior management on a project? Good summary views, short but powerful reports. So this is something I feel like we haven't gotten as sophisticated on. There is some reporting that you can do in JIRA that we haven't been pushing up to our administrators. I was hoping that by having this the reporting feature built into Confluence, which I know certain people are already using and comfortable using, that this would be a page that they could use that way. But I will say that, again, pretty much only my team of people has been using this on a day in, day out basis. Our steering community never quite gets into this level of detail. They're not necessarily looking at the projects this way and in this much granularity. So it has made it a little bit hard. I haven't quite figured out the best way to report up using all of this information. There's tons of information there. And when we need to do sort of annual reporting kind of stuff, we're able to get what we need out of it. But I would say that I haven't gotten the eyes of our administrators on this stuff in that granularity. Okay, let me see if there was a response. Yeah, definitely. I would say there still needs to be a translation layer. And yeah, I haven't figured out what would be the view that would be enough information, but not too much information. I think that's always the struggle, is to try to figure out how do you feed just the right amount of information upwards. Let's see. I don't think I covered about the hosting. So I'll just give, let me find some notes I had written down about that. So there is the cloud versus server setup that you can do with Confluence and JIRA. So we actually use the server products. So we have a locally hosted version. The cloud is a really good option if you don't have, again, that IT support. Like we do have a library IT who is able to set this up and do all of the migrations and the updates and maintain the tools for us. Our admins upgrade JIRA and Confluence monthly, and they usually only do very small patches. And then they might do quarterly larger patches and feature releases. We did a one-time perpetual license, whereas with the server space rather than a cloud, which would be a subscription. So we also have an academic license. So again, when we first started using Confluence and JIRA, it was an affordable option. I think over time it's starting to get, again, a little bit pricier. But again, it's been worth it and it has evolved. It's been a good tool that has evolved over the years. So hopefully that answered that question. Let's see. I see that JIRA can be overwhelming. Yes, I would agree, Molly. And some people, okay, yeah, Louisa said you switched to the online version and that's taken a while to get used to. I haven't used that, so I don't really know what the differences are and if the same features and availability is there. Let's see, are there any questions that I haven't covered yet? Again, feel free to unmute yourself and ask if you have any other questions. I see we're hitting the noon hour, so let's see. Do you have any paperwork that accompanies items as they go through the process, or is it all? I will say right now we're pretty much just relying on the system. We don't have a lot of granular documentation about going from step to step. It's something we should probably develop, because as we've had people come and go, there's people who we've had, you know, a string of retirements or people leaving for other positions. I'm starting to feel like it would be nice if we had more documentation to share when we're onboarding new people. So that is something that we don't have a ton of documentation to share. But again, I can, if we develop it, I will definitely share it. And I think that leads me actually to, since people might be leaving, I'm going to go ahead and just wrap up a little bit. I will stay on if people have more questions. But I did want to point to some of our resources. So we do have the Project Manager's Toolkit. And so I would say definitely look there. There's also the Zotero reading list. So I'm going to make sure I put some portfolio readings that I used to kind of prepare for this presentation there. And then if you do have follow-up questions, feel free to email me. And then if you have ideas for future demo topics, please contact the Project Manager Steering Committee. We would love to hear from you. And there is a link as well to the list here where you'll see the steering committee list of people as well. So let's see. I will go ahead and stay on. If people have more questions or if they want to chat, I am good for the next half hour. So feel free to. The recording, I will be working with DLF, and we will try to get that up and share it on the listserv. So we will do that. Thank you all. I'm so glad that, yeah, I hope this was useful. I know we moved very quickly, so. Okay, great.
Hey, Cristela. This is Emily. I have a couple. I'm just wondering a little bit more about the batches and the types of tickets. So I'm thinking about, like, for our instance, we have kind of a few different workflows that we would be using regularly. So, like, there's like a rights and reproductions workflow. There's like kind of archive systematic digitization workflows. There's new acquisitions. And I think with each of those, I think what I'm hearing is it seems like it might be useful to have a different project essentially for every different workflow. Is that correct? Or would you suggest doing that kind of setup in a different way? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would think about how one workflow either is related or isn't related to another workflow. So if you have a workflow that feeds into, you know, like if you're talking about your acquisitions, then becomes, you know, the project, you know, how do those relate? So without knowing more details, I would say you would want to kind of see maybe what, and actually I didn't show this, but we started with a whiteboard exercise where we just kind of like put it all on a whiteboard to kind of see what makes sense. And we thought about it for a long time and did more whiteboard drawings to kind of understand how the CPP, this overall project, might feed into the DAMS ingest workflow and how they fit into each other. So I would think it would take a lot of thinking that way to kind of say, how do these different workflows relate? Is it a separate workflow, or is it kind of a part of the same workflow?
Yeah. So would you suggest then trying to duplicate, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, trying to duplicate workflows or rather not duplicate, but like reuse the same, if everything has to go through conservation and everything goes through imaging, maybe that is one workflow. And then if for some other things there is an additional workflow, then that is like a separate project, kind of similar to, so for example, like rights, if something is going out to a publisher, then maybe there's an additional workflow that's like clear rights with publisher, clear rights with trust, notify the people and get rights payments or whatever. And that rights piece is essentially a separate project. And is that what you're saying? So you're kind of nesting projects within each other?
I would say, yeah, think about how one thing relates to the other. So yeah, is it overlapping, or is it parallel to the other work that's being done? And I would say, how complicated is the workflow? Does it need a JIRA ticket, or could it be something that's just captured on the project plan? You know, like, could you have a checkbox on the project plan that's like, follow these 3 steps? Because then maybe that's easier than trying to have a whole JIRA ticketing system for what's essentially 3 steps, you know?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't want to like dominate the questions here. If anyone else has questions, please jump in. But
you're okay for now.
Okay. Could you go back to the project plan page and then just to look at like where that type of checkbox would live? That sounds like a really good idea for what you're describing.
Yeah, I would say if it's something really basic, you might want to think about that. So I didn't talk a lot about what we do. So our project proposals are actually Word documents because I kind of consider it all. So we basically just upload a Word document until it gets reviewed by the group and approved. And then it becomes a project plan. So we take that information from a Word document and put it into the project plan. And so all that information that was written then translates to here, and then we can update these pages. So I would say I don't have any examples of well, I do have some things that, so like I could see just creating like a little, like, you know how Confluence has tasks, you could just have tasks built in that people have to check those boxes, that they did those 3 steps.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
So if it's something very simple, so let's see, I'm trying to get down to, like, we have this rights sort of thing where we upload a rights checklist. So this is something that people fill out before the project starts, and it's just a Word document. And this is more of like a checklist. And so every project plan is going to have an attached project checklist. And I'm saying that every, as in an ideal world, every project has project rights checklist. So this is just, again, a Word document that walks you through all the rights assessment stuff. And we just basically found that, again, having this Word document is a little bit more portable. It's something people can fill out, and then they just upload it to the project plan. And this is like very standardized wording, and, you know, we were able to work out exactly what we wanted in a Word document. So it's not, I think it would be really hard to capture this information in a JIRA ticket. It's nicer to have it just kind of as a checklist.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah. So I would say use your time and resources wisely, like what's really useful. And I didn't get into it, but we were trying to use the Confluence plugin, this little, what is this called? I can't even remember what the plugin's called. But we've had varying wins and successes with that. I think, again, it's one of those things you really have to stay on top of to kind of track sort of the phases of the project in the project plan. I don't know that we're going to continue with that. We were trying to get a little more timeline driven. What is that plugin called? Oh, the Roadmap Planner. So there's a lot of other tools that I'd love to hear what other people are doing in terms of, I love this feature, the task report, which basically gives you any tasks on this page or any of the child pages. So I didn't get into all of that, but we do use the meeting minute and the tasks. Oh, okay. Thank you, Lisa. Thanks. Yeah, I agree. It's like totally true. Like the timeline, it's like, it's hard to use because you really have to, I think hopefully I'll find a good project that it's like, it did help, but it's very high level. It's hard to get detailed with that specific tool. So basically, I'm going to get out of this view. In the meeting minutes, people will use tasks, and then you can have the task reporter display all of the open tasks on this page, which is kind of cool too. So there's a lot of like plugins within Confluence that might solve your problems rather than trying to go into JIRA and getting JIRA to do some of those things, if it's simple. Let's see, any other questions, comments, or things people want to share? Otherwise, I think I'm going to wrap. Okay, great. Thank you so much for everyone who's still on board.